All right, news on the go for you now. Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, that's Barbara Creecy, is currently addressing the media on the findings and recommendations from the Ministerial Task Team report on voluntary exit options from the captive lion industry. We'll try to explain what this all means for you, but first, let's take a listen to what the Minister has to say.
Number and level and employment and skills of workers and other potential land use options within the biodiversity economy. To develop and oversee the initial implementation of a voluntary exit strategy and pathways from the industry for stakeholders who wish to pursue that option. This exit strategy should consider all possible options and consider all possible options prevailing within the captive lion industry. To identify, mobilize, and endorse potential funding mechanisms, sources, and procedures to support the voluntary exit strategy and pathways. And to provide advice to the Minister and the Department on any other matters relating to the captive industry or any request by either myself or the department. Now, colleagues, as you know, South Africa is a country with diverse cultures, remarkable geological wealth, and exceptional biodiversity, much of which is unique and with high levels of endemism. With this rich endowment comes the responsibility and the challenge of ensuring our species and our ecosystems are conserved and used sustainably for the benefit of all South Africans and future generations. Section 24 of the Constitution requires reasonable legislative and other measures to be put in place to ensure that the environment is protected for the benefit of present and future generations, including through promoting conservation and securing ecologically sustainable development and the use of natural resources. This report should be understood within the broader policy context of the White Paper on Conservation and Sustainable Use and the policy position on the conservation and sustainable use of elephant, lion, leopard and rhino that was also approved by our Cabinet last week. And at the end of this media statement, I do have a note for editors that covers the key aspects of that policy statement. In summary, the key recommendations of the task team were that government approve phase 1 by engaging voluntary exit candidates to finalize the pathways and the exit items. Phase 2, the acquisition and incineration of lion bone stockpiles contingent upon sterilization of lions and compliance with the voluntary exit principles. 3, to issue a short-term directive to ensure consistent application of animal well-being is assured through issuing of permits and conducting oversight visits. And lastly, prohibit captive lion breeding in the medium term to safeguard benefits of voluntary exit. I'm pleased to announce that Cabinet has endorsed all of these recommendations. I wish to thank the Ministerial Task Team for the sterling work it has done in producing a comprehensive and credible report with a set of findings and recommendations which address the difficult issues in the captive lion industry as contained in the terms of reference. I also wish to thank the industry and other key stakeholders who have assisted the task team in its work to identify voluntary exit options and pathways from this industry. I'm now going to hand over to Mr. Chetty to do an overview of the report.
Thank you, Minister, for this opportunity. I can get all the mics here. Okay. Thank you, Minister, for this opportunity just to brief the media around the work that we've conducted. And there's a PowerPoint presentation, some of which repeats what the Minister said. I'll go through that very, very quickly. Most importantly, the background and context to which we were appointed has been primarily around the captive lion industry. And there are a number of concerns for a long time over the captive lion industry. There are four that I'll highlight. The first one has been the ethical concerns, specifically around the animal well-being. The second is the regulatory issues. And certainly we're seeing both from the international community as well as the domestic community. There has been restrictions placed on importing of captive lion trophies, importing of captive lion carcasses, as well as we've seen the court judgment which came out in 2019 regarding the export of lion bones. Together with that, and I think you need to see it holistically, is the policy position of the DFFE that the Minister outlined earlier. The third challenge that the industry is facing is a decline on the revenue and an increase on the expenditure. And particularly that affects or it risks, and we're concerned about the risks on the well-being of lions. Essentially what we've seen that the quotas at the moment are zero since 2019. There's been a trophy ban, importing of trophies to the US and Canada and a range of other countries. The cost of food has increased, particularly with the avian flu as well as the foot and mouth disease. So which means that the facility owners had to pay more for food for lions. And with the revenue pressures, we are concerned that one of the victims of that would be on ensuring the well-being of lions. The third issue is the reputational issue. South Africa is considered as a premier wildlife destination. However, being the largest country with the largest population of captive lions and the export of bones, there is a significant amount of concerns raised by animal welfare NGOs, both locally and internationally, and there's a lot of pressure on reputational of South Africa as a premier wildlife destination, impacting also on tourism. And finally, the issue I was going to raise is the misalignment between this particular industry and the trends globally. Globally, there's an increased social awareness and a rejection of the captive lion industry or abuse of animals. We've seen that and our research indicates that we've seen that with the bile bear industry, the fur industry that has been in pressure to close down. As the social awareness starts to grow, there's going to be more and more pressure on the industry itself to close. And certainly, I think this was taken into account from 2018 when there was a parliamentary colloquium, which said that government needs to conduct a policy review with the view of ending this practice. 2019, we saw the high-level panel established by Minister, which came out with very clear recommendations on captive lion industry. This was supported by Cabinet, and in 2022, we saw the establishment of the Ministerial Task Team under Section 3A of NEMBA. The terms of reference, I think Minister outlined that. There were 5 terms of reference, 5 focus areas, for the terms of reference, which were very, very specific. It was understanding and engaging with stakeholders, the audit issue, implementation of a voluntary exit strategy, mobilizing resources, and undertaking any other task. So we've used the legislation and the guiding policies of the department, and the white paper comes up significantly in this, NEMBA and animal well-being significantly around that, as well as maximizing the conservation benefits while minimizing the risks. all of this outlined earlier by Minister itself. So the task team adopted a specific methodology. The first one was to look at peer-reviewed publications in this environment, the legislative environment, all the reports that have been put out, as well as we focused a lot on how did other countries do this with other species, particularly the closure of the mink industry, the bile-bay industries, etc., in trying to learn what are processes that we could replicate in the country, specifically with lions. And based on that, we've developed a set of guiding principles for the MTT. We've then identified who are all the key stakeholders, which is a broad set of stakeholders, including the public in general. We then had a process to identify candidates that want to exit the industry voluntarily and gather their opinions on it. We obtained expert input and advice from a range of people, from expert wildlife veterinarians in this regard to people who have specific knowledge around the industry and the economics of the industry. And we've incorporated all of that in developing our recommendations. We've conducted an industry audit, and the industry audit was based primarily on verified data, and we verified the data against provincial data and provincial permits that were issued. Using all of that, we formulated a set of voluntary exit options, and we then analyzed those options to look at what the feasibility of that would be. At the end, we then engaged again with a range of stakeholders, including the industry, to be able to test our findings with them and what their views are on that. We've also engaged with conservation and animal welfare NGOs to mobilize resources for the voluntary exit program. So regarding stakeholders, there are a number of stakeholders that we've met. I mean, some I just want to highlight, and you can see the range of them. With the traditional health practitioners, we use lion parts in the country, not significant amount, but a certain amount. We've met with the industry bodies, the provincial authorities, people like the NSPCA, conservation NGOs, and the general public. Out of that, if I could summarize, what are some of the key issues and findings out of that? So we saw the national departments and the provinces support the program. Industry itself didn't oppose the voluntary exit program. However, they strongly advocated for maintaining the status quo and suggested that government strengthens the enforcement of the sector. Facility owners have come forward from different provinces, a lot of them indicating that they are facing financial pressures, and also, given the insecurity of the industry, they would like to move towards an industry that is more secure and more sustainable in the long term. We have, given our resource constraints, argued for incentives, and this was supported by a number of stakeholders as well. A lot of the facilities who want to exit were concerned about the fact that the remaining facilities that are there would take up the gap in the markets. And we consider that in putting together some of the recommendations that Minister outlined. We've also seen a wide range and diversity of policies across the different provinces. Remember, this is a provincial competency, and each province has different policies, which makes it very difficult for enforcement as a result of that. And certainly the capacity of the provinces to do that has to be increased significantly. Focus area 2, what were the main findings of the national audit? I think what is clear is South Africa has the largest captive lion population in the world, with increasing diversification into other carnivore species as well. So in short, there are about 7,838 lions, and it includes a range of other carnivores that are there. Right. When I say this was a spot assessment at the end of September. This industry is quite volatile in the sense that numbers increase and decrease very, very rapidly. And within 1 month, we saw in one province the numbers decreased by about 250 odd lions. This 7,838 lions are spread across 342 facilities, and the main 93% of them are contained in the Free State, Northwest, and in the Limpopo province. There are anywhere between 1,568 to 2,069 workers in this industry, and we've extrapolated it from various data sources. However, let me just say that in all of the facilities that we have spoken to, the workers are not exclusively dedicated to the caring of lions. They do other functions for the facility owners in other farms that they have or other agricultural activities. Stockpile estimates, we've seen that there are about 3,163 skeletons mainly, made up of carcasses, whole skeletons, skulls, bones, and skins that are there. These are the registered stockpiles that we have. The unregistered ones, we don't know. So this gives you a very high-level indication of the audit. We're seeing the industry consolidating a lot more, with a number of the facilities having very, very little lions. So a summary out of all of the key engagements, the audit and the research that we've conducted, some of the key findings is that the industry is large and complex, has a long history, and not aligned to both the current international and domestic policies on conservation. Levels of compliance, and this has come up increasingly, are low and expected to remain as such. Right? There's a high level or a high profile of reports of incidents of animal abuse affecting the reputation of the country, certainly. So what we found from the number of inspections that were done.
All right, a live briefing there from Parliament from officials who are part of the Forestry, Fisheries and Environment Department, or Ministry, I should say, speaking to us there about the captive lions policies. Essentially, this is legislation that's aimed at ensuring that lion captivity, including exploitation and harming of these animals, is reduced, if not completely eradicated in our country. We heard that South Africa has the largest captive lion populations in the world. And Cabinet had recently passed a piece of legislation that essentially will begin the phasing out of the intensive management and captive breeding of not only lions, by the way, but also rhinos as well. And it all dates back to a ministerial report that was sanctioned back in 2022 to this very end. Our team is going to continue listening in for you there in Parliament, get you a sense of what else is said and, more importantly, why that matters for you.